Hey everyone, it's John Karloff. I hope you're doing well today. I have a book review for you. It's my first book review on my channel. I've been a reviewer for a long time here on YouTube, doing channels kind of off and on. And I just kind of wanted to make this video. You know, I want to kind of do book reviews every once in a while. I'm a big horror guy, a big thriller guy. I used to be under the channel Mr. Wildboy94, not the newer one with the comics, but I used to be an older channel that reviewed nothing but like books and novels, and I would talk about well, you know, like Stephen King was like my big thing at the time. That was back in my high school days. And I wanted to come around and start making reviews again. I recorded one the other day. I didn't really love it all that much. I want to re-record that tomorrow or sometime soon. But anyway, for now, I have a review for Bentley Little's The House. I have had this in my book collection. If you followed me since my old Mr. Wildboy94 channel, you probably know I've had this book in my collection for ages. I mean, just absolutely ages, man. It is not great. It's okay. It's not horrible. It's not horrible. But I've been looking at this amazing cover art for ages, man. Of course, this is one of those old covers that came out from Signet Novels, and I love the cover art. I think it's beautiful. I have been so curious about what this book was like for like 10 years now, as it's been sitting in my collection in different totes and stuff that I have around my house, in my basement and stuff, because I had a lot of books. I had to put some in totes, just aside. One day I was digging through some of the totes, I came across this book again. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about this book. So I decided to pick it up and start reading it, and it was a weird experience. It's a very weird book. Of course, Bentley Little is very much like a Stephen King / Brian Keene, more like a Brian Keene type, in the sense that I think Brian Keene is a better writer than Bentley Little, but Bentley Little always has the weirdest ideas for stories. Of course, I've only read one book before this. I forgot what it was called. It was like a guy that was like a techno guy, like he was a computer IT type guy, and his house was haunted. That book was kind of creepy from what I remember of it. It was many years ago since I've read it, probably about 10 years now. But The House is a really weird book, dude. It's a really weird book. Some of the things I'm going to talk about in this review are going to be uncomfortable. It is an extreme horror writer we're talking about. Bentley Little's considered one of the extreme writers, like Brian Keene, like Richard Lehman, and that's good. I like that kind of stuff. I don't mind that. I just like horror in general. I've read some pretty horrific stuff in the horror genre that I've enjoyed, actually. I know I probably shouldn't as a Christian, but I do. For entertainment's sake, just because it was some crazy ideas. It seems like the more limits that you take off of horror when it comes to writing books, writing short stories, splatterpunk, those kinds of things, the more that you see the most creative stuff I've ever seen in writing, ever. Now, the amateur writing style might not be the best part. It's kind of almost creepypasta-esque in some points. Not this book, but a lot of those types of things are. And that can rub people the wrong way, I think, a lot of the time with books. Now, The House is a really weird book, like I said. Essentially, you have 5 people, one being named Lori, then you have Daniel and Mark and Norton, and who else am I missing here? Stormy. There's a guy named Stormy. I really like that name, Stormy. I knew a girl back in the day named Stormy. Now, those 5 people have all lived in this particular house in different areas. It's the exact same house, oddly enough, but in different locations throughout the entire world. I assume they all live in the U.S., actually. But still, there may or may not be more houses. From what we understand, there's just the 5 different houses in different locations, identical, and they're all having the very same or relatively similar experiences while they had lived in this house, and now things are kind of coming back to haunt them many years later as adults. Some of them, I believe Norton is the oldest, I believe. Kind of like they just call him an old man at times. I forgot how old he's supposed to be, but regardless, they're all kind of different varying ages. I don't know who the youngest would be. Maybe Mark? I don't know. I don't think any of them are younger than like 25. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, I read fast. Or faster now than I used to back in the day. So when I take out the time to read a full-fledged 360-page novel like this, this is standard size for most book readers. For me, it's kind of like something I just bomb through, and a lot of the stuff I forget information-wise. So if I get something wrong here, forgive me. If I get something wrong in a future review, forgive me. The House essentially starts to draw these folks back. Well, it may or may not be the house, but these people all have an experience that makes them want to go back to the house. For example, one of these folks, I believe it doesn't matter. He has a son who's making these creepy dolls that he used to see come to life in the house when he was a kid. The adult of the son, the parent, the father, whatever. And he's kind of like, how did that kid know to start making those little toys and stuff? Well, of course, they also start having experiences with a little girl, a tiny little girl. They all have variations of her name. This is where the interesting part kind of comes in, where I think Bentley Little is such a good ideas man. He might not be the best writer ever, but I think that his ideas are interesting. Really bizarre. Really, really bizarre type stuff. It's almost like H.P. Lovecraft, but easy to understand. You know what I mean? He comes across like that a little bit, with more perverse and extreme horror aspects to it. I'll let you know up front, the little girl in the story. Some of them might know her as Dawn. Another person might know her as Danielle. Some might know her as Danielle. Her name kind of varies. There's also a butler that lives inside of the house, and all of them grew up in this house at some point in their life. Maybe their whole childhood, or at some point they did. And they knew this butler as well. His name might be Billings, or Billington, or Billingsham. You know, the names kind of vary. And they're all kind of like, how do we have the same exact experience with this old butler being at the same age he is, but also this little girl, Dawn, Danielle, the different names that she has? How do we all have the same experience with her when we're all varying ages? What's going on here? There's kind of a good and evil struggle in here, because the butler and the little girl might not even know about each other, apparently. One might be good, one might be evil, one might be God, one might be the devil. It's very interesting stuff here that's going on. I won't tell you too much because I don't want you to get too exposed, but eventually, about halfway through this freaking book, which irritates the crap out of me, like 200 pages of this book are all set up of characters finally making their way back to the house after the drawing to the house that has happened in their life. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. But once they get there, they're all kind of just in a situation stuck together trying to figure out what to do about the houses. It's kind of like a little bit of this vibe of Stephen King's The Stand to me. Just a little bit of the drawing to a certain area, taking care of a certain situation a certain way. That part, once they get in the house, I think there's a lot of fascinating stuff that happened. Very creative imagery that takes place there. Also kind of perverse, but some fun, creepy stuff. There's not really a whole lot of blood in this book, oddly enough. I don't think either of the books I've read from Bentley Little have had a whole lot of blood, so I'm not sure if that's something not common with him. I'm not really sure, but there was one scene in here that was pretty horrific to talk about. But anyway, so the different experiences with this little girl, Dawn, that started popping up in their adult life now, it's kind of drawn them back to that old house. One of these folks actually lost his sister. He's very upset about that. He kind of feels drawn to go back to that house too, but he had not had an encounter with this little girl. That little girl, Danielle. The interesting thing with her is that she apparently may not just be a little girl. She tries to seduce people. And there is a lot of scenes in here that are going to be very controversial for people. And this is kind of uncomfortable having this as my first review on the channel, but I am a horror fan, a thriller fan. So when something is horrifically awful, and it's in a book that I've read and I want to review, I have to kind of talk about it. So a lot of people in this book are wanting to have sex with this little girl. And it's like a supernatural overwhelming, because she's almost demonic in a lot of ways of the things that she does to try to get people to do things with her, to tempt adults and parents into situations. There's a lot of that in here. A lot of that. And I'm the type that I think pedophilia is just disgusting. Plain and simple, I think it's evil and disgusting. So there's a lot of that immediately hits me the worst possible way and just makes me sick to my stomach. A lot of this book has that. It is very effective, I will tell you that. If you want an effective horror book, this is going to be it. More out of shock value than anything, but I don't mind shock value. If it's well done, if it's well executed, well written, I will take it. Bentley Little gets most of those things down, so I'll take it. There is a lot of that pedophilia stuff in here. A lot of it. So prepare yourself if you decide to read The House. There's a lot of that in here. But overall, I enjoyed the book. The characters, not so much. They had their little moments of development. Like I said, this character over here, I can't remember a lot of their actual... Like I can tell you their names. You know, Laurie Norton, Daniel, Mark, and Stormy. I can tell you their names. I cannot almost ever tell you who was who. I really can't. I think it's one of those books that are so filled up with so many characters that there's too much page space divided up amongst different people that didn't really need to be there. I think there should have been like 3 people led to the house. Or even 4 at the maximum. 5 people is a little much. It's kind of hard to keep up with all that. So, you know, I don't really think they all had a certain feature where they had to be split up as much as they did, especially in the finale of the book. I won't spoil that for you once again. But there's a lot of characters in here, and they're hard to keep up with. And I'm going to tell you, that first 200 pages of the book were really not that engaging. Once everybody gets to the house at about page 205 or so, is really where the book takes off. Like I said, I really enjoyed it from that point on, for the most part. But before that, it's just a really weird, bizarre book. Not really scary, not really eerie. It has interesting kind of things here and there, but when you have like 5 pages out of every 20 or 30 pages be interesting, that's not really a big achievement in my opinion. So it's a little slow going. It's a little bit longer than it needs to be. 200 pages of setup is a little much, in my opinion. I don't think there needed to be that much to get people there to that house or the houses. Regardless, I had a good time reading the book. It was a fun book. It was a little gross. Not always like in a puke way, you know? It wasn't like a vomit-inducing way, but there's the stuff I've referred to so far. And again, there wasn't even that much blood in here. If blood is your big thing that really kind of gets you away from horror, makes you very squeamish, and for some reason pedophilia doesn't, this book is for you. Bentley Little might be for you as well. I enjoyed The House. I think it's overall decent. Don't hate it at all. I think it's pretty fun. It was okay. Once it got into the house situation segments, I kind of burned through that section. The first 200 pages, that took a long time to get through. A long time to get through, which is not very common with me when I'm trying to get back into reading novels and stuff. Of course, I have my other channel where I read books and stuff too, but still. Anyway, when it comes to The House by Bentley Little, this is not horrible. I could have done a whole lot worse in choosing a new book to read. This is decent. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't bad. It just kind of had its bad moments, you know, not just with the shock value parts, which I actually don't mind. You know, again, shock value I can accept. It's more of the badly written portions. For example, there's a particular thing in here that really kind of just was the most odd description I've ever heard in my life. It was, to me, bad writing. He's discussing one of the characters waking up on the porch of the house one day, wrapped up in a blanket, and he specifically describes that they're wrapped up like a shrimp. What? Wrapped up like a shrimp. It just threw me off. It was one of those things I read it and I was like, what? So that happens with splatterpunk and horror writers a lot of the time. They might not have the most elegant prose. They might have something like that pop in there. It's going to distract you from the rest of the story you just read, even if you liked most of the book you just read. So anyway, when it comes to The House by Bentley Little, if I had to rate this book on a 5-star basis, I'd give it about a 3 out of 5 stars. I like it. It's not terrible. It's not bad. It's a decent book. It just takes a while to get going, which is really kind of unforgivable in a lot of cases because no reader is obligated to stick with your book. They can quit at any time they want. Again, it took me a long time to get through this because I kept putting it down in that first 200 pages. But I think Bentley Little's learned his lesson. I don't think that this was his first book. I'm pretty sure it wasn't. But I think he learned his lesson in a lot of ways. He's kind of stopped doing that because the other book I read from him, the first one I read from him, was pretty good. Didn't have any slow moments from what I remember, but still. Anyway, what are your thoughts on The House? Did you love this book? Do you hate this book? Bentley Little typically has really simplistic titles too, like The House, The Town, The City, that kind of thing. Interesting. You know, I feel like his books could have a better title, but it's a little bit more memorable in a lot of ways than something like, let's say, The Tommyknockers, if you're new to Stephen King. Anyway, again, what did you think about all this? What do you think about Bentley Little? Put your thoughts and comments on this writer down in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say about him as well. Are there any books in general that you recommend from Bentley Little more so than something like this? Is this your top pick of all time from him? I'd love to hear all that down below. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you guys today, and goodbye.